Hello, ladies and gentlemen. A very good evening from Bridge Plus. Thank you for joining us for yet another episode of the Singapore FinTech Festival Green Shoots series. I hope everyone has been keeping well, and for those of us in Singapore, I hope you finally managed to satisfy your dine-out cravings this week. I myself got hot pot. I'm Caitlin from Monetary Authority of Singapore, and I'm very pleased to be a host for the day. So for today's session, it centers around talent, as well as the future of FinTech workforce. As we all know, the job market is really very competitive. It's almost like the Hunger Games, where the talents have to vie to be at the top of the game. They have to be competitive, they have to be relevant. And for the corporates, you have to vie to attract and retain the best talents. So what's really happening on the ground? What kind of trends are we seeing? What are financial institutions and FinTechs doing to stay ahead of the game? And what are talents doing to make themselves stand out against others? So let's find out today in today's Green Shoots series. So to get this started, let's start off with Feon. She's from LinkedIn Talent Solutions Asia Pacific, and she'll be sharing about the key pillars and trends around FinTech workforce, as well as the future of it. Over to you, Feon.
Hi, everybody. I'm Feon, Managing Director of LinkedIn Asia Pac. It's such a great pleasure to be here, sharing with you the future of work. There are four main key themes that we're seeing in terms of the key pillars for the future of work. Many of you might have heard skills. What exactly is so important about skills? We need to help our people build critical skills and competencies to prepare them for future-ready jobs. The second area is the hybrid workforce. COVID has driven a totally different way that companies need to operate. Talent are expecting a totally different way of work going forward. And thirdly, diversity. Companies are beginning to look at why diversity matters so much. And lastly, we'll touch briefly on network, the impact of network and what it has got to do with our people, the talent for companies. So let's go on and share with you a little bit more. If you look at this, you might have come across this headline that Singapore financial sector is to create 6,500 jobs. MAS expects that there will be 2,000 to 3,500 jobs that will be added in the tech sector alone. So if we look at the kind of jobs that is being created, and yet we continuously hear of people being unable to find a next job. There is industry impacted. Industries like retail, food and beverages, construction. These are the industries that are impacted, and there are lots of jobs that are being lost along the way. And yet, in another sector, jobs are being created. So what do we do in order to really solve this problem? If we look at the jobs that were around 10 years ago, I still remember, like if we look back, the Y2K times, 20 years ago, everybody is talking about Y2K. And people were talking about front office, middle office, back office. But today, the jobs that are being advertised is data scientists. Data scientists. Everywhere you go, everybody is asking for data scientists. And you have got geotech engineer, the new industry about sustainability. So what do we do in order to keep on coping with these ever-changing needs of where the economy is taking us? So the true problem is jobs is not the problem. It's skills is the problem. Workers would have to have evergreen path to jobs. No matter how jobs and skills are evolving over the years, if only the workers are continuously knowing what are the skills they need to have and continuously upskill, reskill themselves in order to know what are the jobs that they can apply to. And then what does it matter for the companies? We would love for the companies not have to struggle finding the next talent, struggling to find people to fill the jobs. And for the companies, they need to start thinking about how they recruit differently. And lastly, this is really helpful for them because they help to expand and have a different, diverse set of people as well. And truly, above all else, when we get this right, no one gets left behind. So exactly what are we seeing on the LinkedIn platform? Already, people are picking up skills. Already, we are seeing 300% increase in hours spent on LinkedIn Learning. That's during last year alone, 70,000 hours from LinkedIn members spending on LinkedIn Learning. It goes to show that people are excited, they are keen, they want to acquire new skills. So what do we do to help the people to transform and land on their next jobs? You might be curious, exactly what are people learning? So here's the top 10 courses that is the most popular in Singapore right now. It's really a combination of soft skills and digital skills, which we can imagine. After all, digital is a big movement right now. Everybody is going digital. It's almost the compelling force of change right now, going digital. And you can see that soft skills is also an essential part. Organizations are constantly looking for soft skills because it's not good enough just to have the technical skills. Soft skills, the ability to collaborate, strategic thinking, working together in teams, ability to communicate, that's actually one of the top soft skills that organizations are looking for as well. So it's encouraging to see more professionals adopting a learning mindset that will be pivotal for them to acquire new skills. Speaking of that, how do we then transform this economy? I think that there are three major components that is essential. Government. It will be helpful when government continuously talk about skills instead of talking about jobs. Governments play a huge role if they can roll out incentives, policies to encourage organizations and encourage people to acquire new skills, incentives to encourage companies to help people to move from one role to the next. Companies, they need to change their mindset in terms of how they acquire new talent. Instead of just looking at the degrees or past experience in the specific roles, they need to broaden their thinking about what are the transferable skills. Organizations can also provide online learning courses or courses just to help the people to make that shift as well. Making internal mobility easier for your people is also part and parcel of what organizations can do. In fact, we are already seeing more than 80% of the organizations being very open about it because the war for talent is real. And lastly, the workers. We all play a part. We all need to have that mindset to keep on learning because this should become part of our growth and continuous learning become part of the mindset. In fact, in LinkedIn, we give all our employees LinkedIn learning courses and we encourage them to acquire new skills. We also make sure that we put in place an internal mobility campaign so that we allow people to transform into new roles as well. The second key phenomena we're seeing is how companies will need to start planning for a hybrid workforce. Our employees will continue to work from home. And some days, they will want to work in the office, but some days they will want to work from home. So we need to start to set them up for success. And well-being will be an important part of it. And we need to start reimagining the physical workspace to suit this hybrid workforce. Hybrid workforce is here to stay. And there are many benefits to what we can do to drive a versatile workforce. If you can see here in the slide, it says that companies are beginning to look at how they are recruiting remotely. Many companies are willing and they start advertising roles remote. For workers, to actually have that opportunity that is no longer constrained to the physical office. So it's actually one of the key change that we're going to see after or for a pandemic that's here to stay. Take, for example, OCBC that is highlighted here. They said that staying agile is important for them. It's key priority. In fact, it is one of the essential bits of how they need to help their employees to stay engaged. And it's a critical trait in the way they help employees adapt and transform the way they work. Speaking of well-being and what organizations need to do, we see that organizations are beginning to look at the split. So most organizations are looking at probably 3 days working in the office, 2 days working remotely, and that's the kind of hybrid workforce that we're beginning to see. That's what organizations and companies are telling us. To suit this arrangement, companies should rethink their physical work office. As I mentioned, there are companies that are beginning to perhaps scale back on the size of the workplace. They might start rethinking the design of the spaces in order to drive more collaboration. And I think hot desking is perhaps something that's here to stay as well. In fact, in LinkedIn Office alone, we have done away with personal desks. Hot desking is the new thing. We have more open spaces now in order to help us all collaborate more together. And lastly, an important part of the change is diversity. We begin to see that as COVID-19 has impacted more women, we are beginning to see that there's a lot more burden added onto women that is working remotely. They have got family to take care of, and organizations do not want, in their eagerness to build a diverse workforce, equally want to keep women in seat. So we will start to see how important it is for organizations to start thinking about diversity as a key element of how they maintain a remote workforce. Over and above, they might be able to expand their talent because if we are able to start increasing our talent with people living with disabilities as well. With the rise in remote work, more organizations are willing to hire remote workers with disability, and there's a greater opportunities for organizations to hire people living with some of their disabilities who have the skills, but they may not be mobile. Ultimately, in LinkedIn, we care about creating economic opportunity for all members of the workforce. If we approach this goal with a spirit of diversity, inclusion, and belonging, I'm confident we will get there. The last bit to close off, I want to talk about the power of networks and making connections with others. I'm sure that resonates with all of you here today. And that's why you're here today for the meetup and the networking sessions. Our data says that people with strong network are generally more confident about their future. In fact, 4 in 5 people believe that connecting with the right community will help them land in the next opportunity. However, only 1 out of 4 know exactly how to go about doing it. At LinkedIn, we see that as a missed opportunity, and we are actively looking for ways to help our members bridge this gap. One way we have been doing it is through Network Gap Alliances, a program where we partner with organizations from nonprofit, private, public sector to help job seekers overcome the network gap and offer career coaching, as well as advocating for inclusive hiring. As part of this alliance, we brought on board many organizations like L'Oreal, Credit Suisse that has worked with them to showcase some of the best practices and success stories and hiring plans to amplify it on LinkedIn. This is just one of the many examples of the power of networks. And I urge all of you here today to build strong networks and reach out to those in your community that need help. Thank you.
Right, thanks a lot, Feon, for the very insightful sharing. So Feon talked about how the importance of going digital, especially in this economy of all the disruptions going around because of COVID. And personally, I couldn't agree more, because in my line of work, I work on APACs, and that's where I work very closely with financial institutions and FinTechs. And I saw how COVID has disrupted the way we work. In many cases, all these organizations have to start thinking about ways to adopt digital solutions so that they can continue to remain relevant in this market. And on APACs, as a digital innovation platform, we have seen how it has helped all these organizations to adopt all these digital solutions faster, cheaper, and better so that they can stay at the top of the game. And here in Singapore, there are many other initiatives that MES and the industry have embarked on to ensure that we continue to stay relative and competitive. In fact, just this morning itself, fresh off the oven, we had Singapore FinTech Association announce the launch of SG FinTech Club. So this club was conceptualized by MES together with SFA with the main goal of fostering deeper social engagements. So there will be hospitality privileges around the FinTech street. So if you go along the street in Robinson Road, there will be discount rates for you to go for co-working spaces, networking places, as well as F&B dining outlets. And that's where you can make use of all these different privileges to deepen your social networking skills, get engaged with like-minded people across the industry. There will also be upscaling classes as well as master classes, and even coffee chats with our MES very own Chief FinTech Officer, so that you can expand your networking around the industry. So all in all, this FinTech Club serves to help you upskill yourself as well as to get greater access to career growth opportunities. But of course, this is just one of the most recent initiatives. I'm sure on the ground there are many other initiatives that FinTechs as well as financial institutions are doing to stay ahead of the game and do better talent management. So let's hear it from the ground itself today. We have a panel discussion where we have industry experts from both the financial institutions as well as the FinTechs. And moderating this session will be Rebecca Martin from MES. And before she starts off with the session itself, for those of us who are on Zoom, if you're interested to ask some questions, please do post your questions on Zoom. All right, let's get things started. Over to you, Becca.
Thank you, Caitlin. And welcome to my panel. I'm very excited to be joined today by Bianca, who's the head of people operations at Wise, by Ed, who's the Singapore Tech Center lead for JP Morgan, and by Shadab, who is the president of the SFA and also the head of strategic partnerships for Quantifeed, which is a digital wealth management solutions company. So before we get into the panel discussion today, and it's going to be a good one, I want to ask each of you about the Singapore FinTech Club that was just announced earlier today. I know all of your organizations are involved in this Singapore FinTech Club, so I'd like to know why you're involved and what you're most looking forward to about this. And I'll start with you, Shadab.
Thank you, Becca. So let me just give a bit of a quick background about the SG FinTech Club. Caitlin just explained a few things, but let me just give you a bit more color on that. So we have announced this club in the morning today, and it's a big launch for us, given that it brings value to the individual members or the professionals and individuals of the FinTech ecosystem, in addition to the corporate members that we have been covering so far as the association. So the idea is to bring together great minds across the whole FinTech ecosystem to connect, to discuss, to learn, and to inspire each other. Feon earlier mentioned about the power of network, and I think that plays in very well to this initiative that we have launched. And if I go on to talk about the three elements of the FinTech Club, essentially it's about meet up, link up, and power up. What do you mean by that? Meet up is essentially allowing and creating a platform where all of the individual members of the various companies that are part of the Singapore FinTech ecosystem, they can meet up, network, and discuss news and explore other partnerships as well. Link up is essentially allowing the FinTech individuals to sort of link up with the other networks that we already have, both locally and internationally. As an association, we have partnerships with many international associations and organizations as well. So if there are ways of using this network for individuals to power up their network and to connect and to explore opportunities. That's the second important element of the FinTech Club. And thirdly, power up. So it's to essentially enable everyone to look for more knowledge-based opportunities to learn from the successes as well as sometimes the failures of the FinTech founders and also the professionals in the industry to learn from each other and to be able to build up the FinTech ecosystem further. And it's available not just to individual members, but we are also opening it up to the SFA corporate members as well. As a corporate member of SFA, which is 800 plus members of the association at the moment, you can all nominate 3 members or 3 individuals or employees of your company to become part of this club. And of course, new joiners can join as in their individual capacity itself. The idea is to bring the FinTech ecosystem a bit more vibrance and to create more opportunities for people to network and collaborate with each other.
Great, thanks for that. And Ed, what do you think of the FinTech Club? What are you looking forward to most?
So I think for JP Morgan, I think innovation is definitely part of our DNA. So every time you hear Jamie Dimon speak, he talks about FinTechs, he talks about innovation, AI, ML. He's really plugged into this scene. Twice a year, the East Coast visit the West Coast to meet the Silicon Valley FinTechs. So there's definitely the innovation is part of our DNA. I think the second part is JP Morgan has a great culture. Internally, great culture around diversity and inclusion. Externally, we like to give back to the community, and we really think that the Singapore FinTech scene is something that we really want to contribute back to.
Hopefully we can get Jamie speaking at the festival this year.
That'd be great, yeah.
Bianca, what's your interest in the FinTech Club?
Yeah, I mean, at Wise, we're all about wanting to solve problems for our customers. So where we can have the opportunity to learn from other people's success and failures, I mean, that just helps us get to solving people's problems even quicker. So.
Nice. All right. I'm going to start the discussion with a quick fire round of overrated, underrated. So I'm going to throw a series of phrases, words related to talent, related to hiring, and I want your one-word response only. And just to make it easier, since we're sat in a line, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 along the line. So overrated, underrated, starting with graduate recruitment programs. Overrated or underrated?
Overrated.
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 All 3 agree, overrated. All right, there's actually an audience question that's come in about when will we start valuing experience in music and entrepreneurship and sports as opposed to traditional qualifications. So maybe you're heading that way. So maybe I'll ask, higher education, overrated or underrated?
I'll abstain.
Abstain, okay.
Yeah, I'll abstain on this one as well.
Come on, guys, this is going to be...
I'm going to say overrated,
yes,
but with a disclaimer. I mean, clearly there's some roles you need some level of it, but the way that we value it can be like very over-focused.
Fair. Remote working, we heard a bit about this in the presentation from LinkedIn earlier. Remote working, overrated or underrated?
Underrated.
Underrated.
Abstain.
Abstain, okay.
Underrated.
Underrated, all right. Rough consensus there, perhaps. All right, professional development plans, underrated or overrated?
Overrated.
Overrated.
Underrated.
Wow, all right. First contentious one. How about you, Bianca?
Overrated when they're done poorly, underrated when they're done well.
Okay, all right.
I support that.
All right. Nice. And last one, ESOPs.
Given that my employers are watching as well, I'll abstain.
All right, Ed.
I think I'll abstain on that one too.
I'm going to say underrated.
Underrated. I think if you're on the startup side here, perhaps you would probably agree with that. All right, since today's session is all about launching the FinTech Club and about encouraging deeper and more meaningful connections across the ecosystem, we've decided to run this in quite a creative way. So I gave each of the panelists homework over the weekend to think about the FinTech industry from their own perspective. So from kind of nurturing and developing talent through to hiring talent, through to kind of representing new talent with your role at SFA, thinking about the FinTech industry and some of the phrases that you hear all the time, some of the trends, the buzzwords that are overplayed at the moment and you think really add no value anymore. You've heard it too much, doesn't really mean anything, you're over it. So each of the panelists are going to tell us their trend, their buzzword, their pet hate, their overhyped, whatever it is. And then the rest of us as a panel are going to try and debate against them and argue why actually it adds lots of value to our industry. So it's a bit of fun, but hopefully we'll learn something along the way too. I'm also keeping an eye on Q&A from the audience. So if you've got questions, please do keep them coming in. And then at the very end, we're going to crown a winner. So there will be a poll for the audience at home to vote on the best debater for the day. So please do pay attention. You will be asked for your opinion later. And I'm going to start with my first victim at the end, Bianca. Please let us know your FinTech pet hate, your FinTech buzzword, and what you're going to be talking about today.
Okay, so I actually asked our team, our people team, and some of the words that they said that they're just so overhearing are like disrupt, totally overused, A and B tests. Even the word FinTech got a mention. But what I want to talk about today is to dispel a myth, and that myth is that people are joining FinTech because it's a really sexy industry and because there's lots of money to be made. Now, I'm not going to say that there's not sexy elements and that there's not any money to be made in it. You know, there are some sexy elements. You know, most FinTechs have pretty cool offices. You get a lot of perks, good parties, that kind of thing. But actually, the reason people are joining and staying at FinTechs is they're wanting to work on problems that are impacting real people and that they've even felt personal pain on, and they want to fix them. So we actually did a very informal poll on Slack recently, and we used emojis to vote, so that gives you some idea of the formality of the poll. But we asked people if they were a customer of Wise before they joined us, and 45% of people were, so that they had sought us out to solve a problem that they were having. And we hear time and time again from our people that, you know, what motivates them is, you know, they used to send money home, and they would pay these huge fees, and they would lose this money that their family could have. And instead, you know, we've built this platform over a series of time, which now the fee is extremely minimal, and actually what we're working towards is making transfers eventually free. And people want to be part of this, and they want to be part of solving this problem. And then we've got other people that are like super entrepreneurial. They may have had other businesses, and to open in a new market, usually to get paid by customers, you need to set up a legal entity. And then from that legal entity, then you could set up a bank account. But now we're building stuff to solve that pain that people have really suffered, where we can just give you bank account details in a number of markets. So I would contend that people are actually joining FinTechs to solve these problems that are impacting people's lives, that people have felt the pain themselves, and they want to be part of the solution. So not just about the sexiness and the money.
All right, so there you have it. People aren't just joining FinTech because it's sexy. That's what we're going to be arguing against now as a panel. Ed, I have to go to you. Are you trying to say then that banks aren't solving real problems if they should be working at Wise? Come on, Ed, you must have an argument against that.
I would argue that there must be a financial aspect to them joining a FinTech. So, you know, FinTech goes IPO, there's a big windfall at the end of that. You're saying that that's not true at all, or?
I'm saying that they're there because they want to solve the problem. Now, the financial aspect of, you know, potential upside in the future is not a bad thing, but I don't think that that's what's actually keeping them there.
Okay. And the problems that they're solving, you're describing as social problems that they want to solve, rather than something that's, you know, technically challenging due to volumes or complexity. It's much more for social good.
Yeah, and I mean, I think with trying to solve those social problems also, I mean, you need the technical skills, and there's complex, because if they were so easy to solve, people would have solved them already. So there's a heap of complexity behind trying to solve something that looks like a fairly simple problem.
Shadab, let's bring you into this.
So, I mean, my own personal experience has been, and I've worked for some rather larger corporates as well. One of the things that really helps, you know, for people who are looking for new challenges all the time, and also who are looking at more independence and ownership in what they do, they tend to go for the growing companies as well. And that has probably been prevalent in the FinTech industry as well. if you just talk about this, because then you're solving certain problems which people may not have even thought about earlier, but just because there is technology available to solve that problem now, they're able to solve that. So I would be a bit neutral on that. There is always that balance between what your career aspirations are in the long term and what you are trying to achieve in the short term, but at the same time balancing it with the right amount of financing coming in to support your lifestyle as well. That's also important, and it all depends on the stage when people are entering the FinTech workspace as well. So things might be different for different people.
I think you can't deny that there is some sexiness to working at a FinTech versus working perhaps in it for an incumbent organization, but there's probably a general trend that we're seeing towards roles requiring more of that social purpose, right? That's what people are looking for in their job is something that they can connect to where they're working, particularly when you're working from home. You're not sitting in an office, you don't have that environment around you. And maybe what you're getting at, Bianca, there is a bit around the culture that you have from working in a startup, the culture that you have around a FinTech. So how do you keep that culture there when you're working remotely, as we all are at the moment? What's been your experience?
I mean, to be honest, it's tough. It's not always easy when you can't get people physically in a room together, but we do things like, we have a mission day. We've actually got it next week. And our mission day is where we get everyone focused on the mission, and we actually bring in customers who give us feedback, good and bad, to keep everyone, focused on what we're actually trying to achieve here, which is to make, transfers eventually free for people. So, there's no magic formula. I think it is really hard to kind of keep culture, particularly when lots of new people are joining and things like that. But when people are really committed to that culture and are there to retain that culture, they'll make the effort to do so as well and bring the new people in on it.
Interestingly, Ed, you've got your global, for JPM, your global innovation, I guess.
Innovation Week, yeah.
Innovation Week happening at the moment. So you've got a number of offsites that are happening and ways to try and bring the team together virtually or physically. Do you think it's quite similar to what Bianca's been explaining there?
I do. I mean, oddly enough, sometimes these events are actually easier to organise virtually. The hackathon this year is a real true 24-hour event because it's virtual and we're linked around the globe. So I think staying connected with your team and having a culture, yes, not being together in the office all the time is a bit of an impediment, but I think with the digital tools that are available now and the right discipline and understanding that you have to talk to people both in a professional way, but also you have to get to know your teams so that you can connect with them. I think those are the tips that I would give people in just trying to make sure that connectivity and the culture stays while we're remote working.
Final words, go on, I interrupted.
And I was surprised to see the time management working from home as the third line on the slides that Feon from LinkedIn was talking about. I should have seen it to be the first one, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because that's a challenge all of us have. I mean, I can talk about from my own experience. I've got a 3.5-year-old who is trying to knock at the door at any opportunity he can get at. And how do you manage time with that in mind? Because you have to balance all there are blurring lines between your work and your personal time now. So
the luxury of us sitting in a studio here today, not sitting at home in front of a laptop. All right, I think we'll move on to our second pet peeve, our second buzzwords. Thank you, Bianca, for that one. And my victim number 2 is going to be Ed. Take us away with your hyped phrase, hyped sentence.
Yeah, I think, I'm coming at it from a bank. So for me, I think there's a lot of hype around battle between FinTech and bank, to be honest with you. And I would say traditionally that's probably aimed at the customer, the market share. But I also think it leaks into talent. And you'll hear the phrase of the brain drain, talent drain from east to west, because there's a myth that everybody wants to work on the West Coast in FinTech. It's kind of related to Bianca's point. I would argue that actually we need each other, so it's more friend and foe to be honest with you. And I think, again, that's true from a customer market share perspective, and especially wholesale banking. I think that is a big client base for many fintechs. But then from a talent perspective, most banks are undergoing some level of transformation. And we want to learn how the fintechs do things. So I think we're very keen to hire talent from the fintechs. And I think that's starting to turn. So, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, all I was hearing was, I'm going to a fintech, I'm going to a fintech. And to be honest with you, quite often it was, they're going to IPO and I'm going to make a ton of money. But that was the trend. And now I think it's coming the other way. So I think fintech professionals understand that some of their customers will be wholesale banks. And if they have experience in the wholesale bank, that will pay them dividends if they go back to fintech at some point. So I think having that cross-fertilization, pollination between the two is really good. And I think, at JP Morgan, like I said, what are we trying to learn about? We're trying to learn, what we call a shifting to the right, which is going to a cloud-native architecture. And then we want to shift to the left and go to a product operating model, so we become closer to the customer. We want to be more agile. So all of this stuff we can learn from the fintechs, because everybody makes mistakes. So we should be learning from the talent that we can bring in. And I think we offer some challenges that are unique to JP Morgan. I mean, the volumes that we process on a daily basis in terms of transactions, it's millions of transactions a day. It's tens of thousands of transactions a second. We're moving, I think the last statistic I saw was $7 trillion worth of money around the globe. If you can't get some level of satisfaction and pride working for JP Morgan, making sure that the financial world is moving, I think I'm not sure where you'd get it, to be honest with you. And
that's the ultimate banker sentence there.
And I would end by saying we have made some significant hires from fintech. So our CIB CIO is ex-Akamai, Google, Lyft. Our wholesale banking CTO is PayPal. So I think that proves that we are able to attract fintech talent.
So you think it's a myth, to summarize, it's a myth that all of the talent is moving from banks to fintechs,
yeah.
And actually it's a full circle and we're seeing more fintech talent going into banks as well. Would
do.
you agree or disagree?
I think I'd agree with Ed on that. I mean, there's a different bit of balance coming in with all the digitization that's happening, especially in this pandemic era. I think one of the shifts that we have seen, and I think I can tie it into my own experience with my work as well. The myth is that it's robo-advisory, which is going to wipe away the business of the investment managers and the asset managers and probably the advisors as well. It's not really the case, because the way we are seeing it is robo-advisory essentially is a way of enabling a process which is basically tying or matching the risk profile and the needs analysis of a particular customer to a particular portfolio. Now, there are multiple ways of looking at it. You can say that you can provide a much better ROI or alpha, but that's not entirely the case. Robo-advisory is about creating more scale into wealth management and the ability to create these processes and to do these matching a bit more efficiently. Now, that is not just creating jobs at the fintech side, but it's also creating jobs at the financial institutions FI space as well, because now you have a much bigger segment of customers to sort of service, and they are all expanding into the wealth management space. So there are jobs that are being created on the distributor side, on the asset management side, and as well as on the fintech space, which the fintechs that are trying to service these FIs as well. So with what Ed was saying, earlier the whole discussion was about fintechs versus FIs. I don't think so. It's all about fintechs with FIs. It's all about the financial services industry growing together, and fintechs will probably play a bigger role in the overall pie, but the growth of the pie is going to be is going to continue, which will help not just the fintechs, but also the tech jobs in the FI space as well.
Your job is meant to be arguing against Ed. We've got you defending him. Bianca, do you see many people from Wise leaving you to go and work for a bank?
No, but I mean, I think sorry, Rebecca, but I agree with part of what Ed's saying here in that I think, FinTech and banking, we're working closer together. We have banks as our customers, so we have banks that use our technology to give a better outcome for their customers. At the same time, I think, for individuals making the transition from FinTech to a bank or from a bank into a FinTech it can be quite challenging for people because they just operate very differently as organisations. So I think on a personal level, for people making the transition, people from a FinTech going into a bank would probably struggle with some of the hierarchy and the structures, bureaucracy, that kind of thing, and the reverse for when someone's coming from a bank to a FinTech. So I think, from a personal transition point of view, it can be challenging. And that would just be something for people to consider is, there's pros and cons, I suppose, both sides, but which one are you more suited to?
I think we're starting to see banks have more similar work policies, I guess, that you have at FinTechs or have had for a few years. So Citi recently announcing no Zoom Fridays, where they're trying to kind of, I guess, respond to better work styles and better ways to work from home. I think probably we're seeing more mirroring between FIs and FTs in terms of what you might be offered on a day-to-day basis, your type of work. So maybe those structures and boundaries are coming down. Now I'm agreeing with Ed. That's not intentional. All right, let's move on to our third and
let me finish that as well. I mean, from my perspective, like I mentioned, it's all about the growth of the overall pie. So the financial services industry grows, the fintech industry grows with it together. So you are looking at more jobs being created. You are looking at possibilities of, of course, cross-pollination happening. But at the same time, that's where our SG FinTech Club comes in, because you have more vibrant community, we have more networks, more conversations happening. Maybe there's a unicorn getting born out of Singapore, which is trying to replace, solve a bigger problem. So there are ways of looking at it. I think it's all about the vibrance of the community, which is coming in when you have more such successes coming in the network as well.
So picking up on that, before I move on to our final trend, there's actually a question from the audience about where is the talent gap? So where is the talent gap and what can we do to address it? And I think that probably applies both to FinTech and to financial institutions. Is there particular types of roles that you're seeing in Singapore, and what can we do to help support and grow a more vibrant talent market here? Shabab, do you have an answer, Shadab?
I'll let the FIs to start on that.
FIs, Ed, to you?
I think basically everything that we're trying to do in transformation is there's more demand than we have supply. Not only in Singapore, it's probably in every centre that we're recruiting in. So what is that? We're doing cloud transformation, obviously. We're trying to move to a product operating model and agile. So product managers, product owners, agility leads. Of course, we're doing a huge amount with data, AI, and ML. So, data science, I think, is a term that's overused. I think there's data science, there's data architects, there's data analysts. Anything to do with data, I think, is in short supply. And I think some of these are really ideally suited to crossing over from a non-technical role. Being a data analyst, you don't necessarily have to have a computer science degree. So I think there are definitely a lot of roles that, I recently spoke at IBF TFIT panel, and for me that's a perfect example of a crossover role that could be filled by somebody from outside of tech. So it's all of those new emerging areas that I think, there's a bit of a tech skills arms race for.
Bianca, you mentioned you actually put up 2 job ads this morning, and Wise is heavily recruiting at the moment. What are the types of job roles that you're looking to fill, and where do you see a gap that you're hoping to fill here?
I mean, we've got a very large range of roles that we're trying to fill at the moment. I think, engineering and product is quite challenging for us to fill in Singapore. I think, and global mobility has been severely impacted by COVID. So while it's difficult to bring talent in because of COVID, but it's also difficult to send people out to get further experience in other locations as well. But yeah, it's a competitive time for good candidates. So it's a good time to be an employee. Yeah.
All right, let's move on to our final victim then. We're going to pick up on the final pet peeve of the fintech industry. Over to you.
So a myth or a?
The pet peeve for your one was to do with unlimited leave.
Correct. So I think unlimited leave is something which has been talked about by some of the companies that I've seen. And my honest take on that is that it doesn't work, because the reality is we are in Asia and we are in Singapore. And right when we go through the JC and the uni process, there's always that clarity of following the process and making sure that you're ticking all the check boxes. And you don't want to be seen in front of your senior management and your employer that you are taking an advantage of the unlimited leave possibility. So you end up taking very few leave, or probably the leaves that are probably allowed through the laws. I think there is an MOM law on that. So yeah, that's my sense. I don't think it works.
It doesn't work. In Singapore specifically, I guess, is your argument there. Bianca, do you have that policy at Wise?
We don't have unlimited leave, but we do have a thing called mobile wising. So we do say to people that they can work wherever in the world for up to 90 days a year, subject to some tax and visa kind of things, but that's our overall philosophy. So we do provide a lot of flexibility for people to go and do what they want to go and do. We do have some additional leave types as well, like compassionate leave. So you can use this compassionate leave for when life gets in the way, I suppose. So if you needed to attend to a broken car, or you needed to the school shut, for example, and you need to look after the kids. So we do have some additional leave types around that. I mean, I think, sorry, Rebecca, I think I do agree. Like, unlimited leave can be a little bit difficult because people may not take the leave. If people are really in their work, everyone's always busy. Think about how stressful it is the days leading up to before you take leave. It becomes too hard and people won't take it. So for places considering unlimited leave, I would probably challenge and say maybe you need to put in a minimum amount so that people are actually getting the break that they need, because we know people will come back refreshed, they'll come back with more energy. So there's a lot of benefit for making sure people at least take a level of leave.
I saw on the news this morning that Bumble is taking a global week off this week for all of its employees. So maybe that's an alternative way to do it than unlimited leave. Ed, what's your perspective?
I was just thinking, in a related, do you believe that a 4-day week on same pay works?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because now you're looking at getting the maximum attention out of your employees.
Yeah.
And to be honest, with some of the companies that I've seen been very successful in getting the employee engagement, any initiative that gives empowerment to employees, the ability to have the ownership in the work that they do, and to manage the flexibility of the time themselves, it really pays off in the long term. Because then you're looking at more engaged employees who are ready to give you, get on a call at 11 p.m. with a client in that time if they need to, just because they know that you are not looking at them and watching over them, and you have their back.
So the unlimited leave would work in some locations?
No. Unlimited leave would not work in certain locations.
Okay.
Because the problem is the timing of it and how much do you take it? How do you keep that balance? So that's why there is a certain minimum leave that is there. That really makes sense to me.
So how does that differ to your empowering the employee by giving him a 4-day week?
It differs, because 4-day week, you are at least having certain level of KPIs and certain items to be filled up in those 4 days, right?
Yeah.
There is accountability there in those 4 days. But if you have unlimited leave, you don't know when it starts and when it stops. This is, you have a certain time frame dedicated for work, certain time frame dedicated for leave.
Good debating there. All right, we've heard the three arguments. So you've heard about the only reason people join FinTechs is because of the sexiness of the FinTech industry. You've heard that banks and FinTechs don't work together. There's a brain drain from banks into FinTechs, and actually that's not true. And then you've also heard that unlimited leave doesn't work. So those have been the three kind of pet peeves that we've been arguing against today. You'll be seeing on your screen now a poll so that you can vote on who has been the best debater. We won't reveal the results of that poll until the end of the session, where we'll crown the winner, and you won't know what the prize is until the end of the session either, so stay with us for a few more minutes. Whilst you're voting, I'm going to ask a few audience questions that have come in during the session. And there's one that's from Karen in the audience that says, outside of the obvious, what are the biggest challenges you've noticed in workplace culture changing over the past year? And how will this impact the workplace in years to come? So we saw a bit about this in the presentation from LinkedIn earlier, talking about workplaces changing, the space that you're in offices. Shadab, you're nodding along there. What would your answer to that question be?
I think my own view is that work from home will probably be more acceptable in the longer term as well, even for larger companies, as long as there are ways to manage the KPIs a bit more stringent, a bit more cautiously. So yeah, that's the long-term view. I think in a certain way, work from home was not always looked up upon in certain circles, in certain companies, but I think it's become much more prevalent now. So that's my sense. For the longer term, it will stay.
Yeah. Bianca, there's a question here for you about how to be an effective manager over Zoom, particularly with new hires. The challenge there of someone joining and they really don't have any concept of what the culture might be.
Yeah, I mean, I think you as a manager or a lead can do so much, right? And you can talk about the culture, but people need to see the culture and they need to absorb the culture. And this is where I think you need to bring in a lot of other people to help support that. So getting people, when they're new, just talking to as many people as they can, and hearing about their experience. So not going and having like a checklist of technical questions that need to be asked, but really understanding, what is this company about? Why did people join the company? What are some of the challenges in the company? How have you dealt with issues in the past? And that, you as a manager can talk about it, but actually people need to experience from many, many different people. So I would just say get people talking to a really wide range of people in the organisation.
Great. And Ed, actually, so you mentioned talking at IBF earlier, and there's a question here about interesting learning resources that people can go to understand how to better understand challenges within financial institutions and FinTech. So do you have any example? Maybe you could share a little bit more about your session at IBF. Are there any other resources that you'd recommend for someone wanting to learn more about FinTech or financial services?
Yeah, I mean, my session at IBF was really, I gave some examples of, I kind of, in my mind, I have a top 5 hires that I've done in my career, and at least 2 of them are outside of tech transfers in, and they've kind of gone on to become, product managers or global heads. And I believe that if somebody is very successful in one career, they can probably transfer into another sector and be successful. But generally, I just think, I think technology is moving so fast. We can't be complacent. We've just got to continuously be learning, as was mentioned earlier. And there are so many resources. I mean, we're very lucky at JP Morgan. It's a big firm. There are some world-class resources for upskilling. There's Skills for the Future. We have something called Skills for the Future, for example. But there's many ways of doing that. I think you have to be able to find the time to make sure that you're staying up to date.
Nice. And then a final question from the audience, Shadab, on equity. So I know you abstained from talking about ESOPs in the overrated, underrated earlier, but that equity is obviously an important part of a package when you're working at a FinTech, a smaller FinTech, and perhaps a way to attract talent away from the banks that are now taking more of the FinTech talent. Can you talk a bit about the importance of equity and perhaps, actually we were talking before about secondary markets and how that will make that more appealing?
No, I think equity component is a very important element of overall compensation package in fintech or any startup as well. The way I've seen it evolving in the recent past, I think that has become I would say a much more prominent component of the overall compensation package as well. And this is definitely going to create more interest in this sector. And it is also going to create more, I would say, better professionals or more engaged professionals coming in and joining in. It also benefits the company in the long run as well, because now you are not just attracting an employee who will be there for a while, learn as much as possible, but when he starts becoming more productive for you for the longer term, he leaves. So, and it ties in very well with my situation as well. I mean, there is a reason why people continue to be in fintechs and growing fintechs as much as they want, because now you're looking at building your long-term equity value as well in a company. And this is going to be a very key part of the overall compensation package, and this will continue to attract bigger and better talent in the longer term as well. So I definitely see with the secondary markets opening up, of course, people will start realizing the fruits and benefits of the equity package as well. And we have seen that happening with Grab to a certain extent. And I'm hoping that this happens for future as well, with more unicorns coming in, with the growth of the companies in Singapore. There is more equity component that's being, more employees are getting richer, and then you can see more people coming into the industry as such.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, I think it's time to see who we are crowning as the winner of the debate. If we can pull up the results of the poll for who was the best debater in this discussion. We will hopefully be seeing it on the screen in just a minute. While that is coming up, the last question I'm going to ask each of you, and we've only got a minute left, so I was going to ask for very quick advice for the audience. Given this session is all about growing your network and building your career in fintech, any final words of advice? So maybe we'll do that first while we're waiting for the poll to come up. I'll start with you. We'll start this end.
Mine would be join the Singapore FinTech Club. That's the best way to go on and network and collaborate and be part of the vibrant fintech ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, I think networking. When I was younger, I didn't really realize how important the networking was. I think now it's very important.
I would say just ask everyone for as much feedback as you can possibly get, but also articulate what it is that you want. No one's going to read your mind in terms of what you want out of your career. So if you're really clear on it, just make sure you tell as many people as you can, because you never know what opportunities may come out of that.
Nice, and I've just been informed backstage, because I couldn't work out the iPad, that the winner is, drumroll, Bianca. Congratulations, you're crowned the best debater. And your prize is, the first round is on you for the Singapore FinTech Club first meetup. But that's okay, because there's discounts, so it'll be cheaper. All right, thanks so much for my panel. Thanks for joining us today. And back to you, Caitlin.
All right, thanks a lot, Becca, Ed, Shadab, and Bianca. Congrats to Bianca as well. We talk about how the differences between the fintech as well as the financial institution space, but I guess for myself, I'm really looking forward to connecting with everyone, regardless of whether you're from the fintechs or from the banks. And I can't wait to connect with everyone through the different social engagements that the Singapore FinTech Club will be having. But in the meantime, let's move on to the next segment, where we'll be having our very own Chief FinTech Officer from MAS, Sopnendu. He'll be talking about the SG FinTech Club, as well as the role that the talent plays in the ecosystem. Over to you, Chief.
Okay, I'm the last one. Okay, good afternoon, all of you. I was telling today morning a little story how the FinTech Club came into what it is today. I was meeting this founder who was an ex-CEO of a bank, and he started this FinTech company. And we met many founders like that. And all of them had a regret that after they left their job in JP Morgan or where they are, they lost a lot of club privileges. And their families also lost many privileges in terms of club and access to social places. So that's one loss for them. The second genesis behind this club was in my own journey to Palo Alto and San Francisco, and I found many times they have this lovely wine bar, restaurants, evening places where they hang out, and they meet founders, investors, they hire talent, they meet people there, and that becomes an interesting place to network. And the third reason why we thought we should have a FinTech club was because there is always this, if you go to these interesting hotspots, there's always this neighborhood which tend to come together, whether restaurants, F&B, workspaces, clients, and they all tend to stay together. And that's led to this discussion around, shall we have a FinTech club? Can we offer them a club privileges? Can we get them to network together? Can we give them an opportunity to start socializing, meeting investors over a drink? So that's how the club came into force. But that's the club. And I was hearing the panelists talking about talent, and I'm not going to repeat that, but my view on FinTech talent. There are three distinct characteristics of the FinTech talent, I say from my perspective. First, they are extremely, they're almost like an amoeba. You know amoeba? They will take the shape the way you want them. If you want them to stretch, they'll stretch. If they want to do a different work, they'll engulf themselves and do that. So they're extremely flexible as a talent. They can be CEO someday. They can be a talent, a programmer someday. They can be fixing the door of their little office. So they're multi-talented, almost like an amoeba, changing shape based on the demand. That's one distinct talent FinTechs tend to have. Second, there's no free lunch for them. Because I have seen both sides. I worked 18 years in the bank. There's no free lunch for FinTech because they have to work hard. Their work is digital. Either they do it or they don't do it. You cannot hide behind emails, governance, bosses, layers of people in a bank and avoid a talent scrutiny on you. FinTech talents have a binary delivery, and that means no free lunch for them. Third characteristics, they're extremely tolerant. They can stand behind, they can wait for a contract to come for months and months and months and do free work, which you call as a free proof of concept, where many banks indulge in. And they'll be still smiling at you, hoping that after 12 to 18 months of proof of concept, you'll give a contract to them. Extremely tolerant people, and they tend to take all these challenges on their face as they deal with the client. These three characteristics make the FinTech talent truly outstanding. And why that's the reason why I do respect them in a very different level when I meet FinTech talents. They are not your ordinary employees. They're not your ordinary talents. If somebody has worked in a FinTech company for 2 to 3 years, every bank should hire them in the first interview because they have gone through that tremendous journey of struggle, enterprising, thinking, and their ability to respond to different challenges. So we are extremely proud of our FinTech talent in Singapore. We have 10,000 plus FinTech talents. They're powering this industry. They're powering our future. And we expect them to grow more and more. And hopefully the future will be decided by the FinTech talents. With that expectation and optimism, I want to thank all of you again. Thanks for having me. Thanks, Kettle. By the way, before I miss, can you get the camera back on me? Because my staff, Caitlin, was very upset today. I made a remark saying that she was doing a boring job of setting up the FinTech club. Indeed, she did a remarkable job to redesign the club structure. Again, thanks for putting together a lovely idea and program together. Back to you, Caitlin.
All right, thanks a lot, Chief, for your inspiring note and for your last message as well. I'm sure all of us learned a lot today about the FinTech ecosystem as well as the talent space. So we have come to the end of the session, brought to you live from Bridge Plus. I hope you enjoyed the session as much as we did. Next week, we'll see you again for another episode of Green Shoots, where we'll be covering about how learnings from the public blockchain can be applied to the central bank digital currency. All right, see you again next week.